Another segment of profound research and findings, and Dr. Lasko is going to share with us how he has created in the laboratory oneness with bacteria in order to create profound results in healing with love, which is also the name of his book. Okay, take it away.
Yeah, well, previously I had referred to the results I was getting with patients in my practice when I was exploring the impact of loving, healing energy. But that was so complex. There were so many variables working with people, and you can detail what some of those variables are. You've got belief systems that people have, for example, foods that they've eaten, different genetic composition that they come to this with. So many, many variables. So I decided that instead of dealing with human beings and exploring the impact of love, I would go to the laboratory and work with single-celled organisms, bacteria, cancer cells grown in tissue culture, even DNA, the very genetic blueprint of life, and then water itself, even a non-living system. Start to explore what the impact of human consciousness focused by intention would be. And I went to the laboratory and I started doing that, and then I made a very significant discovery. And this happened when I was looking through the microscope at bacteria in a petri dish where they were essentially growing. And suddenly I had a revelation, an epiphany, that we were all created by the same source.
Right.
And even though I thought that this bacteria was called a pathogen, it produces disease, it was created by the same creator that created me.
So the labels that we put on ourselves and each other, what you were doing was actually removing the label of pathogen with this bacteria.
Yeah, I transcended the labels
Right.
that we apply. In fact, we live our lives by these labels. We have compartmentalized things with the mind, because that's what the mind does, and we label things and then we think we know them. For example, we could label something a spontaneous remission when somebody has terminal cancer and suddenly a miracle occurs. Well, we have a name for that. We call it spontaneous remission, and we put it in this little drawer, says spontaneous remission, and now it sounds like we know what it is. We don't. We do the same thing with people.
Right.
Peter, Paul, put a label on it, and it's in a drawer.
Skin color,
mental
cultural.
illness. Well, mental illness, cancer is a label. These are all labels, and it implies that we really know when we don't, because there are so many variations on this and so many variables associated with it. Well, anyway.
And I gotta say, just before we go on, to hear a doctor with your kind of background speak about this is really amazing. And the way that you're approaching everything is from the wholeness of the human being, or not even just the human being, of even the bacteria, the living organism. And that is really a shift.
It is a shift.
In consciousness and awareness, in education, in research, because I don't think that's how you were taught.
No, well, you have to, education ultimately is something that you have to unlearn.
Right.
That's the funny thing.
To get to where you've gone and are going.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. You can use education up to a point, then you have to drop it.
Right.
It's
Right.
the same way as getting across the river. Then at some point you stop carrying the boat, you leave it on the shore, and you move on.
Right.
The same thing with education. Otherwise, you're a mental robot.
Right. Okay, bacteria.
Yeah.
Oneness.
So, looking at the bacteria under the microscope in the petri dish here, and having this sudden awareness that we're both created by the same source, and that it had as much right to exist as I did. All these judgments about it, all these filters and beliefs about it, dropped away, and there was only my awareness vibrating at the same frequency as it, because everything that exists has a signature, an energetic signature, a frequency or group of frequencies at which it vibrates. And when my consciousness then, as the pure consciousness started to vibrate at that frequency, at the level of consciousness, the two became one. And then I discovered that when I introduce an intention into that field of unconditioned acceptance, because I unconditionally accepted its existence, when I introduced an intention into that field, I could reduce the growth rate of the bacteria. That was my intention, was to reduce the growth rate, not to kill it, but to reduce its growth rate. We were able to reduce its growth rate by 50% relative to controls measuring the optical density using a spectrophotometer. And then I said, wow. So unconditioned acceptance is really unconditional love.
Right.
Because when you feel unconditionally accepted just as you are, and you may have never felt that in your life, but if you were to feel that, you would feel unconditionally loved.
Right.
You see?
And you created that vibration with this bacteria, and were able to affect the results of the growth rate by that experience of oneness.
Well, the unconditioned love is like a field in which everything starts to vibrate in harmony with the love. The love, in a sense, is the universal harmonic. In the sense that it unconditionally accepts everything as it is. It accepts the truth of what is. Accepts the truth of what is.
Right.
So it comes into oneness with whatever is. That's why I call it the universal harmonic.
Right.
And what happens then is if you introduce an intention into that loving field, that intention has the maximal impact relative to other intentions, which have all of these other considerations and unconscious countervailing forces. See? So anyway, that was a major discovery. And then I went on to work with cancer cells grown in tissue culture. And to make a long story short, I found, I started to explore specific intentions to see, again, I had to totally accept the existence of the cancer cells rather than
thinking they're bad, wrong,
attacking them
right.
with my thoughts. I accepted their existence because that's the truth.
Right.
They are existing. So I was simply accepting what's true. And then in that unconditional accepting field, I would introduce an intention. And I tried actually four different intentions. I won't go into that, but the intention that had the maximum effect on the growth of the cancer cells was return to the natural order and harmony of your pre-hyperactive cell line. Because cancer cells are growing at a faster rate than the normal cell line of that particular type of cancer cell grows at. Cancer cells grow at a faster rate.
Right.
So I simply instructed them to return, not to kill them,
Right.
because I totally accepted their existence, but to return to the natural order and harmony of their pre-hyperactive growth rate. And we were able to reduce their growth rate by 20%
This is profound.
relative to controls. And then what I did was I started to explore the difference between imagery and thought intention. And again, I found that imagery contributed half of the impact and thought half. So when I added the two together, we were able to reduce their growth rate by over 40% relative to controls.
And I just want to remind the audience that you were approaching this from the perspective of oneness and unconditional love with the cancer cell, the bacteria, all of the aspects and the elements that you were working with.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
So we're going to come back for another segment with Dr. Lasko. And we're going to discover what he is doing and what he has also discovered in ways to work with you and I, and how he is assisting people in coming more in resonance with their heart and love. And this is a really, really impactful subject that I am very committed to in supporting people in becoming more self-loving,
Mm-hmm.
And so I welcome you to come back as we come into more understanding of what you're up to with your workshops. And also, he's offering a discount for people that are potentially going to be signing up for seminars as well. So thank you for joining us for this segment, and we'll be back in a few minutes.
That instead of dealing with human beings and exploring the impact of love, I would go to the laboratory and work with single-celled organisms, bacteria, cancer cells grown in tissue culture, even belief systems that people have, for example, foods that they've eaten, different genetic composition that they come to this with. So many, many variables. So I decided exploring the impact of loving, healing energy. But that was so complex. There were so many variables working with people, and you can detail what some of those variables are. You've got
another segment of profound research and findings, and Dr. Lasko is going to share with us how he has created in the laboratory oneness with bacteria in order to create profound results in healing with love, which is also the name of his book. Okay, take it away.
Yeah, well, previously I had referred to the results I was getting with patients in my practice when I was